From the Major Label Debut Podcast Network, this is your MLD Record Club. I'm Graham Wright, and this is the inaugural episode of the Record Club. From now until the heat death of the internet, Major Label Debut will discuss one notable, interesting, or otherwise worthwhile record a month, I think is the plan. And this month, we're talking about the new joint from the English band Dry Cleaning. The album is called Secret Love, and joining me to dive into it, talk about what we loved about it, talk about how it vibrated on our frequencies, is Major Label Debut producer John Paul Bullock. John Paul, hello.
Hello, Graham. I'm so excited to be here this morning talking music with you.
The feeling is mutual. You know, we started this notion partially because I was griping about my own failure to keep up with new music and to immerse myself in music in the way that I used to when I was younger, and in the way that you have always been a shining example to me of someone who just seems to voraciously and intelligently and mindfully consume new music. And in fact, so much so that the word consume is probably not even appropriate there. But nevertheless, you inspire me. And this was a really rewarding exercise. Just the act of listening to an album 4 or 5 times in sort of quick succession rather than listen to half of it once and then forget to pick it back up, it made me feel something again about listening to music. And this record certainly, I thought, rewarded repeated listening. I guess before we dive into the album, maybe you can give a quick hit on what your relationship with Dry Cleaning has been up until now. And maybe you're really good at describing like what a band is about if no one's ever heard of them before. So for any listeners who decided to tune into this without checking out the record, who might not be familiar with the band, if you have like a capsule pitch on Dry Cleaning as well, now's the time to throw it.
Well, thank you so much for the lovely compliment, first of all. And secondly, yeah, I have a relationship with Dry Cleaning as long as they've been around, sort of ish. I saw them in the early days. This is, as you said, their third full length. Came out on 4AD January 9th of this year. It follows 2021's New Long Leg and 2022's Stump Work. The first LP had a breakout single called Scratch Card Lanyard.
Do everything and feel nothing. Wristband, theme park, scratch card, lanyard. Do everything, feel nothing.
Those first 2 records were produced by John Parrish, who worked with PJ Harvey and Sparklehorse, including co-producing one of my favorite albums of all time, which is 2001's Sparklehorse album, It's a Wonderful Life. Shout out Richmond, Virginia. He also played bass on Piano Fire, one of my favorite Sparklehorse songs.
I got sunburned, waiting for the jets to land. Circus people with hairy hands.
And I think a bunch of instruments on that record. But this time around, Secret Love, their new album, was produced by Welsh musician Cate Le Bon, who I'm sure, because this band has been around for almost 10 years in the UK, they've crossed paths at some point. But I think the specific introduction to produce this record was made by Jeff Tweedy. At least that's what the internet tells me, because Cate Le Bon produced Cousins, the 2023 Wilco album, or Cousins, excuse me.
Wilco is like Weezer, where you never know if is that the most recent Wilco album, or have they released 4 since then?
Yeah, no, totally. And always doing interesting stuff. And Jeff Tweedy is an inspiration for a lot of different reasons, but he also seems like a good connector of people and a guy who cares about advancing other artists' careers, which is admirable for sure. And Cate Le Bon, you know, she's just a badass in general. She's made a bunch of great records on her own, and then she's produced records for bands like Deer Hunter and John Grant and Kurt Weill and Devendra Banhart. And I think it's a really logical pairing for these two artists, a group and a producer. I think that my top line comment about Secret Love is that, for better or worse, I think this is a more sonically unified album than either of the 2 records that John Parrish produced. I don't think it has a scratch card lanyard moment. I don't think there is one breakout song that really like feels like a single that would change people's perception of the band. I just think it creates a kind of more cohesive overall vibe where it works as a piece in a different way than either Stump Work or New Long Leg.
I talked to a few people after we announced that we were going to talk about this record, and the common refrain that I got was, this is one of those bands and one of those records that people kept saying, oh, I've been meaning to check that out. I've been meaning to check that out. I really am interested in that, but I just haven't quite picked it up, or I haven't quite dove in deep on it. And my experience before this with Dry Cleaning was a bit like that. It came to my attention when it was already very well acclaimed. And this is the kind of music that critics really can sink their teeth into and talk about and think about, as we're about to do today. And I sometimes find that a little off-putting. And then I would put on the earlier records. And I actually went to see Dry Cleaning in Glasgow when I was there on holiday a couple of years ago. And it's clearly very worthy. You know, you can kind of tell right away that it's worth paying attention to. It is interesting. It is exciting. It has cool decisions happening all over the place. It's a little left to center. But the one thing that was always missing for me was like the obvious handhold to grab onto. And maybe if Scratch Card Lanyard had come to my attention in a different way, I might have like experienced it as a hooky song rather than a harbinger of like an important artist with capital letters, which it's like hard sometimes when a band is really obviously smart and good and people who are smart think it's good. For someone like me, I find it a little scary then. I'm like, I don't know, what if I don't get it? What if I don't hear what other people are hearing, or whatever it is that makes those things a little more, not that the band is aloof, but there's like a aura of aloofness that comes through to me. And this record hit me way more in the chest rather than in the brain. And there's still a lot to think about and cogitate on, but like, I don't know if it's the production, the songwriting, or what, but it really, I guess the word I'm looking for is accessible. And it is a little more accessible, which, it's not a major label debut, but it is. They worked with a new producer. As you say, it's a little more sonically unified. It may not have a single, but it reads to me as a, for lack of a better term, an elevation of what they've been doing, like sort of taking the ingredients they have and deploying them with a little bit more sharpness or a little bit more clarity of message. Does that make sense to you?
100%. That's exactly how I feel about it. Like solidified. A lot of the ideas on the first two records kind of sharpened and elevated and delivered with more force. And, Dry Cleaning is part of a shelf of these British post-punk, in quotes, or whatever you're going to call it, like talk singing bands that all came about at the same time. And I do think of bands like, and it may be unfair, but like Fontaine's DC and Shame and, Viagra Boys and even though those are not British bands, Idols, yeah, like that. Wet Leg is kind of a version of this too, where, there's not a lot of singing, and all of them that have survived have done a version of the thing that I think is really prevalent on this, where there is now more singing. It's poetry over interesting grooves. And then at a certain point, I think melody has to enter the picture for it to not sound repetitive. And I think Cate Le Bon has done a good job of pushing the band towards singing on the choruses. I really do think like Florence Shaw is a genuine talent. She has a quality to her voice and that's really appealing. I think that the lyrical choices are fascinating. Nightmare Fuel. I found a lot of the things that the subject matter of all three records to be deeply disturbing, but delivered in a way that's often quite funny and interesting. And there's something too about a lot of the sonic choices that were made on this record, particularly. There's with Cate Le Bon, I don't know what it is. It's a flangery guitar sound that's on a lot of her recent work. And I was trying to research what that specific effect is. And there was a very interesting piece I was reading about this pedal I'd never heard of. It's called the Expandora, which is like this beautiful distortion pedal that's in an aluminum circular enclosure. And apparently you can open the back and kind of hot swap chips in it and give it different distortion qualities. But that run through some kind of chorusy, flangery effect, that guitar sound creates this kind of warbly, insecure, not seasick in certain moments, but I just associate that with Cate Le Bon now. I associate that with her signature. And from the jump in this record, I really do think you're like, oh, this feels like something that's part of her extended universe now. Like that they've made friends and they're on the same team. They've joined forces.
I've always, since before I understood what I was loving, I've always really loved a record that has a coherent sonic identity and a unique, distinct sonic identity. And one of the joys of listening for the first time to a record like that and then returning to it is the way that it announces what that sound is going to be. And the more you listen to it, the more you sort of hear, I always think of Kid A whenever I think of anything. And those first synth tones of the first song on the record kind of contain all of the sonic information that you're about to receive. Like they really herald what's to come. And I thought this record started in a way that it doesn't sound like that, but works similarly. And then the way it slowly unveils there's only a few extra ingredients outside of the basic drum, guitar, bass, vocals combo. But when the brass comes in, or it sounds like there's like bass clarinet on a few songs, there's marimba or vibraphone or some kind of like dark bossa nova action happening. And everything that you hear, you'll hear again at least once, it seems like. It's all sort of in conversation with itself. And it's so exciting because it is still pretty austere. It's not like larded up there. And sometimes when you hear about a band working with an interesting producer, the producer's sonic signature is like putting a lot of crap on everything, which sometimes is great, and Kid A is a record that's got 100 tracks of weird stuff happening on every song. But this record doesn't sound like that. It really sounds like there's the drums, there's the guitar, there's the bass, there's the singer, and then maybe there's one other thing happening occasionally. And I think that's to make such a unique and identifiable sonic world out of so few ingredients is a real accomplishment.
Yeah, and I would say actually to that, my one complaint about this album is in terms of like song structure, where I feel like a lot of the songs just kind of start and stop, and they don't feel like they have a specific journey to them. It kind of feels like a drum machine starts and then, or a drum beat starts, or a guitar line starts, and then it builds to a certain point. It sort of maintains that. It reaches like a level of intensity. Her poetry and singing rides atop that, and then the songs just kind of end. And that there's not, even though sonically I think it's very coherent and cohesive, I don't think that there's like a progression track to track in terms of a larger story. And not that that's necessary, but I do think also within each track, some of these songs could have benefited from a little more development in terms of like rise and fall, ABC kind of story inside them.
It's interesting you say that because so much about this record really kept calling to mind for me like contemporary British literature. And my wife and I have really been hitting the library hard recently. And so a lot of these, I guess Sally Rooney is kind of like the flag bearer, but there's tons of really interesting literate books with covers that are reminiscent of the cover of this record, which is sort of like an oil painting or whatever it is with an off-putting aspect to it. Dry cleaning kind of notable for their hard to look at album covers. And many, if not all of them, are written by like younger English women. And there's I'm not a literary critic, in case that wasn't obvious, so I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but there's the way that the stories or the glimpses of stories in these books go by is I'm often quite struck by how they end, which I often find to be quite abrupt and quite midstream, and it's often not sort of climactic or conclusive or satisfying in the way we might traditionally expect from like a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And when that's done well, it's often very arresting and exciting. And other times, you kind of feel like it was a bit slight. And I feel like song to song on this record, almost there's a similar vibe. And there's some songs that I think really did work for me in terms of getting somewhere, or in the fact that they didn't go somewhere made them feel more like pregnant. And then others that maybe left me a little colder. And I think that cold is kind of one of the words that I've often found popping up in my mind. When I saw them play, and I admit I went to the show not terribly familiar with their music. It was more like, what's the coolest gig happening while I'm in town on holiday? And I wanted to be pulled in by it. And I found instead I was a little bit pushed back from it. And I don't know how much that is just like weird cognitive bias around like a British woman talking. But the sonic identity of this record, I think, does put a lot of, not warmth in the sense of like a cello hugging you, but some of the like flanging you're talking about, or some of the brass that's on there, or even the way the drums will sort of like add a little rhythmic flourish or something, I just found gave it some of that energy to counterbalance the frostiness of some of the like the approach, or the austerity maybe of some of the approach.
Well, I mean, it's funny that we started off talking about post-punk and what this this post-punk and is this not? And I do think a lot of the bands that inform this wave of British bands stop. And we've talked to Colin and Malka from Wire and Minimal Compact before, and they're going to come back on the show in the future. And the truth is, it's like a lot of what's been done then and what's being referenced is that like short, abrasive. It's meant to make you think about something. It's meant to, in some cases, hurt your feelings a little bit. It's meant to make you feel uncomfortable. And I think like lyrically, Florence Shaw certainly understands that and does that very well. And, one thing I think that we should talk about here moving forward with Record Club is like how we're going to do this. Like we are about 15 minutes in this conversation. One of the things you pitched was that we, for each of these albums, choose our favorite song, our favorite lyric, and our favorite moment from the record and talk about those. And so I was wondering, like, what is your favorite song on this album?
I went through a few as I was going through the album over and over again. And the one I settled on was the last song on the record, which in today's fast-paced headphone listening society, I often find that the last couple songs on records, I don't hear them very often because my commute's never quite long enough to get through the entire thing. And then I start at the beginning on the next commute. So it took me a little longer to be familiarized with that song, Joy.
Down your hollow tube, I hope to find a small flat joy will build a cute harmless world. Don't run from you cold. No, build a cute flower Buddha. Muscle cold clouds the mind.
It's a little more up-tempo. The guitar is doing something that's maybe a little closer to like a rock and roll guitar hook lick. The vocals are still very much dry cleaning, but the combination of the energy that's coming from the band and the energy that's coming from her just hums really nicely together. And it would work great as a first single if you heard it that way. It's probably, if I was making someone a mix, the song I would choose to put on it. But then putting it as the last song on the record, the way that it like brings everything home and grounds it, again, was just a little more satisfying and a little more generous than I had come to expect from dry cleaning. So that's where I sort of landed for now. But I bet if you asked me again tomorrow, I'd have a different answer. How about you?
Well, I completely agree with you. That was also my pick, but I was going to say, since you picked that, my close second was Let Me Grow and You'll See the Fruit, which sort of is the end of the A side of the record.
You see, I'm afraid about my privacy. Can't get me anything bigger than a sample size. Wind up winch legs. It's April. Next stop, Bimini Island.
really reminds me of that metal era Pink Floyd, like mid 70s. I like how the acoustic guitar sounds, or emulated acoustic guitar, if it's electric guitar, run through one of those acoustic simulator pedals. I can't tell, or if it is that kind of Ovation, the plastic backed guitar. I can't. It has that specific 70s acoustic guitar being recorded through pickups sound to it. Now, whether it's
just like rhythmic brightness, almost like you feel it more than you hear it. I love how they use the acoustic on this record. There's a few songs where it does a lot of strong, subtle work.
I agree. I mean, I think so much of this band is driven by the drums and bass, and that it's so danceable and kind of groove heavy in terms of its. In the two times I saw them live, it definitely, like, you lock into that part of it, and then Florence's lyrics and singing take you to a different place with it, and the guitars do lots of different things. But in this case, I think the guitar is the most important part, and I do really think in other moments in the last two records, in Stumpwork and New Long Leg, that when they use acoustic guitars, it is so startling, because it's not something I associate with either 70s post-punk or with this, talk singing post-punk revival at all.
Yeah, it grabs you. It's a hook. And on such a spare record, anything can be a hook, and a texture can be a hook. And I think that this record deploys acoustic guitar in a very hooky way a number of times. Even if it's ultimately like a headphones hook, it still counts.
Well, so to that, what is your favorite lyric in this record?
A lot of options, needless to say. But the one that I landed on, the one that the most made me stop on the sidewalk, it's the song Evil, Evil Idiot. And the lyric is, I could never live with someone who didn't enjoy scorched and burnt foods as much as me. It doesn't sound as good coming out of my mouth.
Flames baptize the filth of plastic surfaces that has migrated onto my precious natural ingredients. I could never live with someone who didn't enjoy scorched and burnt foods as much as me. Well-fired rolls, unburnt ends, another burnt dish from another place. There have been malicious studies that discredited heavily carbonized foods as carcinogenic, but it didn't put me off. One needs to enjoy life.
Parenthetically, I think there's something really interesting about how the British accent, especially in talk singing, reads to those of us here in North America. Dry cleaning doesn't sound like that to other British people.
No.
The same way that the hold steady to me just sounds like a guy.
Yeah.
But to British people, it sounds like an American guy. Nevertheless, that whole song is, to me, the best example on the record of what I'm talking about it's really literate music. And sometimes when people say literate music, they mean thesaurus rock and Decemberist music where they're using $10 words every chorus. But there's nothing in these songs that isn't plainly obvious language-wise. But then you're like, what is this song about? Just burning and charring all your foods and eating them. And it's the kind of gross, visceral, evocative imagery that, again, is very book to me. I can see reading an entire novel that sort of where the main character is burning all their food throughout, and you're sort of piecing together both the obvious symbolism and the less obvious symbolism. But then to take that and put it over rock and roll music is just, not a lot of people are doing it like that. And I think it's a great example of what's so special and so unique about this band and so worthwhile. How about you?
I really like in Let Me Grow and You'll See the Fruit, when she says the word hiccup twice instead of making the sound, or it is so much what she's doing with you kind of the entire time.
By the balls of my feet, go somewhere, read something, go for a walk, listen to something, hiccup, hiccup.
It's a composition, and she's reading something that she has written, and it feels that way. It feels, when you were describing coldness earlier and putting an intentional distance between the listener or the audience and the creator, saying the word hiccup as opposed to performing, hiccuping, is a way to reinforce this kind of like artifice and let you know that, like you said, that this is sort of a piece of literature, a piece of poetry. Also, it's just quite funny. I don't think I'd ever heard someone in a song say that word that way, and to do it twice in this kind where, like, you know, makes you feel it and think about it, but it's also kind of one step removed from the performative reality. Performative sounds pejorative, but like, I mean, it is
literally, it's self-aware performance. I mean, you literally, when you're doing a song that you've written and rehearsed and recorded, you're performing it. It's not spontaneous. You know, these are not recordings of them inventing the music in real time. And so to hang a lampshade on that is interesting and exciting and smart.
Totally.
And the lyrics in general, I just think this is such a great, you know, you were referencing some of the other talk sing bands. I know this is very reductive. All these bands have their own identities, but I feel like when you hear music like this, often it seems to veer towards the, if not political, then at least like polemical. And I guess it's tempting when you're being declarative in this way to declare. And I think of like Idols and how unambiguous a lot of the lyricism is there. And he's sort of like doing his stump speech over music. And I find this so much more interesting and so much more like beguiling and poetic and truthful in a way that connects with me a lot more than, you know, the literal facts put in words.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I find the lyrics completely opaque. Like I just have no idea what this song is about. And maybe that's not the purpose. I mean, there is a kind of, you know, it's the same thing with bands I love, like REM, where sometimes the song seems like it's written by the singer for themselves, and that it's so, or an in-joke to be shared with a smaller audience, or just the band or whoever. But also, sometimes it seems like they're diary entries. Sometimes it seems like it's a self-contained story or part of a larger story. There's a lot of different things going on with what she's doing, and I really appreciate it. I really think that she's a singular talent, and I think that this record is quite good. And so, what is your favorite single moment from it?
It's on your favorite song, Watch Me Grow and You'll See the Fruit. There's a moment like right around 2 minutes where it's sort of like, it goes to a sort of bridgy middle eight thing, and like horns come in. There's a little saxophone pickup that I can't remember if it's literally the first time a non-core instrument appears on the record, but it's the first time I noticed it when I was first listening. And it stopped me in my tracks. It was so exciting to hear, oh my God, a saxophone's about to do something. And then she promptly starts singing about how she always thinks there's spiders all over her. And like the imagery of the song shifts into this weird new thing. And there's another contender for favorite lyric is where she says, I enjoyed your gig, even though I thought there were spiders all over me.
For coming. People move away from me. I constantly think there are spiders on me and around me. Enjoyed your gig, even though I thought there were spiders all over me.
Man, if I wrote that lyric, I'd take a week off after just to pat myself on the back. That's so funny and scary and brilliant. And I can't like opine on what I think it means, but it just feels good to hear it, especially with this warm bath of horn underneath it in the middle of this beautiful, amazing song. So that to me is my my key. We should come up with like Jimmy the Greek's Lock of the Week. We should come up with fun names for like, it's Graham's single second superlative. We're still working on it. John Paul, what's the John Paul Bullock #1 moment success star?
Well, before that, I would say that moment that you just described is also among my favorite moments, especially because that song does remind me. It made me re-listen to Pink Floyd from that era and be like, oh, this is, especially with the horns, there's like it does seem to be directly referencing that. But my favorite moment in the entire record is during Evil, Evil Idiot. it comes about just after the 1 minute mark. And there's a moment when just this big, blaring, distorted guitar comes in on top and just kind of wrecks everything that a groove has been established. And then here's this amplification that makes it, really takes the song up a notch in terms of its what's going on emotionally.
And my only accessory to blissful enjoyment is those brain foods. The taste, the tone of flame-kissed natural fibers, frozen at the moment of their incineration, is what I live for. I cannot feel it.
That's one thing that this band really does very well, is just still has the ability 3 albums in to shock you a little bit and to make you think, what just happened there? You know, or what is she saying? Or, oh, wow, this is a strange shape of a song, or this is, I mean, they are still experimenting, still pushing. And even as you said, that this is more accessible and maybe has more coherent voice from Cate Le Bon. I do think that the work they did with John Parrish on the first 2 records has informed all this, obviously, and that it's a nice, I want to say final form, but it is a nice evolution. Each of the 3 albums has kind of gone to a different place, and that they continue to push and continue to try new stuff is why I wholeheartedly recommend this album to anyone. It definitely was one of my favorite albums of January, and I'm just so glad that we took the time to listen to it. I really, really think that doing this, I just don't get to have these conversations with people anymore. And I'm glad that we're doing this in this sort of public way. And anyone who's listening to this, if you want to engage with us about it on social media or however, please let us know how you feel about the record. Please go buy the album, like a physical copy of the album. I got a gorgeous apricot vinyl of it. It's just a beautiful looking thing. The artwork, the paintings are really disturbing.
Yeah. Well, the artwork is so, I think the artwork, like any great album art, is a perfect, it's like another language stating some of the same themes as the record, where it's bracing and confrontational and uncomfortable to look at, but also it's this beautiful piece of artwork, and it's beautiful as well as like off-putting. It's by a Scottish-based Canadian artist named Erica Ayers. So I wanted to shout out Erica Ayers for that kick-ass artwork. And it's certainly the last one. I think the thing a lot of people know about dry cleaning is that album cover with like a bar of soap and like gunk hair. And it's just hard to look at. It's just like gross to behold and contemplate. Whereas this one sort of balances the freakiness with this, you know, again, this like warm, there's no way to not say warm analog painting, but it's like, that's a real thing. That's like an object that exists and has texture and depth and is beautiful and also contains information that's like weird and uncomfortable. And I think it's a great window into the record.
I agree wholeheartedly. So go buy it. Go get the record if you haven't already bought it or listened to it. And the next one we're doing is what, Graham?
We're going to talk about Charlie, right?
That's right. Charlie XCX's score for Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. We're going to stay in the UK, and I'm very excited to talk to you about that. A very different album than this.
Yeah.
But I think will hopefully engender as enjoyable a conversation as the one we've just had. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Graham. It's been really, really nice.
Thank you. It's been great for me too. Like I was saying, it was truly a pleasure to dive deep into some new music again and to overcome a sort of aversion I had to going deep on dry cleaning. I kind of thought that I'd bounced off it and I wasn't rushing back for more until we decided to do this. And now there's a record I love that I'll listen to again and that I'll share with people. And I think that this record gets the unequivocal MLD endorsement and recommendation. It is unique. It's vital. It is proving that there's still exciting new things being said with music in 2026, which is so encouraging and great. And also, I just think support women producing records because of all of the horribly unequal gender roles in the music industry. There are no women producing records. It is shockingly, appallingly unusual for there to just be a woman who like has the job of being the producer of records. There's very, very few. And Cate Le Bon is proof that there should be more.
Totally. And go buy some of her albums too. I mean,
Yeah.
she's been on an incredible run recently, but it's all good. And all the earlier dry cleaning records are good too. I like it. It's a healthy vein to mine. So I totally recommend digging down deep into all these artists.
Hell yeah. Dry Cleaning, the album is called Secret Love, and it's available via 4AD Records, wherever good records are sold or streamed. And that's the first ever major label debut record club. I think it's clear that we both loved it.
I really, yes. It's a not so secret love. How's that?
Oh, wow. The love the world must hear about. And thanks so much for listening. This is the kind of podcast I want to listen to. So I assume there's people out there that want to listen to a couple of fellas yakking about bands and records. And we can't thank you enough for listening to this and to all the major label debut content that comes down the transom. Of course, there's more in the pipeline, and stick around for that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the show with your friends and family. If you have requests for new or upcoming albums that you think we should cover on Record Club, we're always open to suggestions. Also, we were talking about Sparkle Horse, It's a Wonderful Life, an album that's also very dear to my heart, and I know it's also dear to Josh Hook's heart as well. And so maybe at some point we need to do some MLD classics as well, because a band like Sparkle Horse is a band that I've really taken it upon myself to try and evangelize for them and spread the word on a band that deserves more attention. Anyway, so lots of potential for the future. But for now, we love you. Thanks for listening. The show is produced, as always, by John Paul Bullock.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, everyone, for listening. In regard to Sparkle Horse, Hometown Heroes, RVA all day. Hello, Richmond.
Josh Hook also produces the show.
Hi, Josh.
Our theme music is by Mr. Greg Alsop.
Hi, Greg.
And that's it, basically. It's called Major Label Debut. You might have read that on your podcast app or platform. And we will return with more tales, news, and contemplations from the corner of art and commerce. So long.
Bye.